Hey folks, this is a short instructional video to give you some ideas of how to go about your World Bank data assignment using the World Bank indicators data that we are working with in this unit of the class. So I know for some of you this will be pretty straightforward. Others, however, might find some or all of the instructions useful. So obviously use whichever parts of these instructions are helpful and useful to you. So to start off with, as we've discussed, you're building a data table. Now, again, for the deadline on Wednesday, if you do make some mistakes, it's really not the end of the world. I'm more interested in seeing you try, figure out how to make tables and do this in Microsoft Word, and go on from there. But I've given you a quick example of this, where basically what we do in Microsoft Word is we use the table function, and we can create what we need. Now, a few things about this. First off, for the page formatting, and you can click on File, Page Setup. This is the Mac version, of course. PC might be slightly different, but you'll get many of the same things. I've put it into landscape format, which you see just over there highlighted. And the reason for that is that it gets us working across the page and makes a little bit more room for the variables. Now, I've done a few of the things here, of course. I've put down rich country 1, 2, 3, 4. In your assignments, you will, of course, put the country names and so forth. But, of course, the table doesn't give me quite enough space for all of them. So it's a pretty straightforward process to just go into table layout, as you see me doing here, and add rows below so you can add as many countries as you need for the purposes of this assignment. Likewise, you can work with the layout of this to make it a bit visually more appealing. This is obviously a pretty rough stage of the whole process right now, but for example, for the variables section, rather than having it all the way over on the left-hand column, I can actually merge these cells and then center the word right over the totality of the variables we're going to be working with. Likewise, we can actually play, of course, we can play with the font quite easily here to make it something that works a little bit visually better for an assignment like this. Generally speaking, tables don't look really good in fonts like Times Roman. It just looks a little bit too busy and soaks up too much space for no real reason. So a simpler one like Calibri or Corbel, which is what we're using here, tends to work a little bit better. For the broader questions of layout, you can highlight your table just over there the way I'm doing it. Now, you have a couple of choices here. One is that you'll find that Microsoft Word does come with prefabricated or preset table design options that you can choose from. And these aren't intrinsically bad choices, and they aren't a bad thing to do. So, for example, we can do something like this, and we can do a few others as well. At the same time, though, it can be a really good thing to design your own and design your template, design your table, pardon me, your own way. Partly as a way of personalizing the design of the assignment, and then partly as a way of just getting a little bit used to some of the tools that you have available to you. For the borders and for adjusting the number of borders, because of course you don't quite need all of these, if you highlight your table and you right-click, you're going to get this little dialog box, and you can choose borders and shading from that dialog box. And now you have the option to remove all of them, remove some of them, and basically fiddle around with the layout of the table. So for example, we can take off the borders at the top, bottom, and the right. And already we're opening up the space of it a little bit more. Now, I wouldn't leave it like this, but of course you get the general idea. To give you some idea of the difference this can make in terms of the quality of the presentation of your work, we'll just switch over to one I've already done and actually quickly switch over to the right spot over here. So I've blacked out the data itself because, again, the whole point is not that we're sharing the data at this stage. But this is a quick and dirty full version. Now, this is not quite the same version that we're using here for this assignment, but it's close enough to make it work. And you can see, I mean, it gets the information across, but it's pretty busy and can be a little bit hard to read. The headers all kind of bounce up and down. We have some at 1 line, some at 3 lines, and so forth. So we can redesign it into something like this, which is a lot more elegant. And this isn't finished because I think there's still a lot more one can do with this particular design, but you see how much easier it is to focus on the information right away. Now, I'm giving you some figures for GDP at purchasing power parity. This, of course, is not quite the category you're using, and some of these numbers might be a bit outdated. So, of course, make sure that you're updating them to the correct ones in the World Bank database. But you see some of the differences already in terms of the way the table looks and the way the layout works. Let's move on here to a few other things I wanted to cover as well. And actually, we're going to just stick back here and go into the World Development Indicators report. So nice thing about the report is that it includes, and I'll just scroll up a few pages quickly here, a lot of detailed information actually, about specific indicators, specific issues, how to understand some of the indicators and what they mean, and you can use and cite all of this information in your write-ups. It's not as if you're only you're only allowed to touch those sections of the report that I've instructed you to have a look at. You can use anything that's useful and that's helpful. And then likewise, you can work with of course, the data that is already found, like for example, in this example over here, where we have these tables already set out. But also, because of course the report can only be so big, you're going to see, and I hope you guys can see this reasonably well on the screen, that you can dig up further tables online. And this is the way I like to start. So the instructions are right here. You basically can use the URLs they give you and then plug in the specific information that you want based on these codes here on the right. In my announcement, I gave you guys an example with incidence of HIV. So let's have a look at that one. So what I would do in that case is highlight Data World Bank Indicator, and then copy this, paste it into my browser, and then paste the indicator code, copy and paste the indicator code at the end of that. What this looks like then is this. Where what we have is incidence of HIV, percentage of uninfected populations aged 15 to 49, and then basically we have the data, we have the background data on all of this on a country by country per country basis. So a few things we can do with this. One is that we can choose specific countries to compare them. So for example, I can click on Botswana and I can compare it to Belize, for instance. And you can obviously do this with a fair number of countries. But then the other thing is that you're going to see on the right-hand side of the site all of these other tools that you can then go into using and make use of. You can look for further data visualization tools in DataBank. You can download some of the original data if you're curious to have a look at it, and if you've ever done some of this before, in CVS, XLM, or Excel format. In other words, there's a really interesting suite of tools available for you on the World Bank site that you can work with to help you understand more clearly what you're trying to accomplish with the assignment. Now, with the assignment itself and with the write-up, really, I'm looking for you to do a few key things. So number one, obviously by now it should be pretty clear. I want you to create a legible and clear table. You should footnote the information that you found, in other words, the URLs and the table codes where you found specific variables and specific information. Generally speaking, you're going to find that there are sometimes small variations in the data. Some data are going to be from 2015, others from 2016 or even 2017. This is fine. You can clarify that in footnotes as needed. Likewise, In some cases, certain data are not going to be available. For example, a percentage of the population living on less than $1.90 per day US in highly developed rich countries. This is not going to be something you're going to find that's going to be measured. So you can just put n/a, not applicable, in those slots on your table. Number 2, choose your variables wisely. Obviously, you have certain ones that are given to you, but then you have a choice. And pick ones that you feel work together well as a group. And again, the World Bank site has lots of data there, so there should be plenty of options to choose from. Part of your writing assignment should be explaining the relationship between them. In other words, tell me why it is you chose these as opposed to some other variables. And then the research component is designed to help you supplement this. So let's go back to our example with HIV. One of the classic problems with HIV, with reporting on HIV and data on HIV specifically, is that it tends to be kind of underreported. There are all kinds of reasons, partly to do with shame, partly to do with lack of medical services and affordable care, and so forth. So looking at the World Bank data tells us something, but not necessarily a heck of a lot. So this is where digging into a little bit of extra research to understand more about the contemporary situation with HIV treatment and the accessibility of treatment in, let's say, Botswana, can really turn an assignment into something that's much better and much more accountable. In other words, the data are useful, but they can only take us so far, and we need to look to other more informal tools sometimes to get a more complete and well-rounded picture of, in this case, health and inequality on a global scale. Last but not least, please do remember that you have 2 versions of the assignment from which to choose. And I've designed these specifically because classically some of my students are a bit more interested in questions of global health, agriculture, food scarcity, and a whole series of other issues like that, whereas some folks are more interested in investment, trade, technology adoption, and so on and so forth. And again, the World Bank report that we were looking at earlier can really be helpful. There we go. Can really be helpful to you in this regard because, again, it includes some basic information on things like corruption and the ease or lack of ease of starting a business in different countries. And that can sort of tie into how you approach and think about this assignment. I hope these informations are going to be a little bit helpful to you in developing your assignments for this week. If you have any questions, I am always happy to answer, but I do ask that you have a look at the discussion on Hallway Conversations first, simply because you're going to find some really good questions that may help clarify some of the points you're trying to understand initially. And then, of course, if you still have questions or if they raise new questions for you, that's why I'm here, and so feel free to ask away.